Davina, back to the podcast. And we're just going to dive right into our conversation today and see what's on her mind. So, Davina, what's on your mind today that is concerning you regarding the state of our democracy?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back on your podcast, Dee. It's such a pleasure to join you and talk about these important matters. So today, with regards to democracy, what's on my mind is how it feels sometimes as if we're engaged in a tug of war. And it's a tug of war in which maybe one side has focused on doing things for the common good, and the other side has worked really hard on developing a skill set of working the ref to hide what their intentions are. Oh, I've really jumped away from my tug of war analogy. I will simplify it. We are pulling on a rope, trying to drag the midpoint of the rope more over to something that approximates reality. Because we all have our own ideas about how the world works. We all have maybe varying ideas on what is best for people. But there are people in our current political climate with different goal sets. And we need it when the media is able to dig down into those differing goal sets and those differing consequences that come from going after different goals. And my argument is always that the Republican Party has a covert set of goals, and those goals are to enrich wealthy people who donate money to them, and rich organizations of wealthy people pooling their money, and even the NRA accepting money from Russia to exert a pull on those politics. Now, people can say, well, Democrats also accept donations as well, and it's true. So we're in a tug of war, except that Republicans have had more success in being bought out by moneyed interests because they represent the moneyed interests better than the Democratic Party does. The Democratic Party has got more done for the good of the people, and the Democratic Party has been behind things like the signing of the Civil Rights Act and steps forward for the United States towards a more perfect union and towards a more cohesive and mutually beneficial society. And the Republican Party has been on a goal of preserving old hierarchy of beneficiaries.
Yeah, let's just stop there and talk about that, preserving hierarchies. I like that. It makes me think about a book that I have read and am rereading, Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, and the importance and that of what she is sharing with us, and how it plays out still in our life today around the world. And then you talk about them preserving this hierarchy, and let's just call it what it is. It's white supremacy, you know, and it also has religion attached to it, not for all, but for a great number of them, so that they're all willing to bring that thread of along with it. But ultimately, it is about power. It is about power that they deem themselves to be the keepers of, with, you know, religious accreditation or validation for some, and for others, and sometimes these intersect. It's because they're white, you know, and they're right. So yes, that's what they're trying to preserve. And that's particularly interesting at this particular point in our country, that it's being ramped up, because they are, for so long, they were literally a majority. But that is changing. And this country has always been a country, it was built by immigrants, and it is now starting to become more round. And that is what really they're fighting against, to maintain that control as a shrinking minority. So sorry if I derailed your thoughts, but I
was glad you mentioned it, because it drove me to think, yes, let's unpack those hierarchies. And I completely agree that it's white supremacy, and that calling what it is helps people interrogate those effects in their own lives. But I'm going to break it down with an analogy that I hope will work this time, to be very simple and look at how nice it can be to have people take care of you. Because I've taken care of my family and cooked them meals for years now. I'm the principal cook in our family. And then my husband went away for a little bit, and I ordered a meal service for a week of meals for me because I'm overweight. And I was like, okay, I got an ad on some network and I subscribed to something for dinners. And I loved being cooked, like having somebody else, even though I'm paying them, but prepare meals for me. I felt so special. It was so nice to have this self-care for me for a week. And I was like, oh my God, I still cook the children their meals, but for me, I had these things and I really liked them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love these type of sauces. Nobody else in my family does, but sour cream and capers, woohoo. So for me, I'm using that to anchor this analogy of going, oh, well, of course it's nice to have people do things for you. And that is the basic human driver behind people calcifying these systems of subservience. When you have a hierarchy, you have somebody higher up and the people beneath them do things for that. You either pay tribute or you toil for them. You can be recompensed, or you can be so subservient that you can't even get any recompense for it. So when we say America's built by immigrants, it is. But even then, it was built before from involuntary immigrants, i.e. the enslavement of people that was stolen. And that wealth, that exploitation created of not only industries that directly employed slaves, but adjacent industries. So a permeation of wealth across America that gave the United States a geopolitical significance among the world that attracted immigrants. So the second wave of American wealth and greatness driven by immigrants, but the immigrants that were attracted from the prosperity that existed in America on the back of people who were involuntarily enslaved. And when you look at that and you go, yes, loss is painful to people, and the people who've profited from slavery directly or have inherited the intergenerational wealth of it, or who've inherited the intergenerational confidence, because confidence is such a driver in the world. And if you look at a lot of white supremacists and what they talk about, they are fighting against a loss of narrative heroism. They don't want to steal their sense of being heroic from that white people are actually heroes and not oppressed. So they mock people who use the term oppression or persecution. They roll their eyes when you say, I am, well, not me personally, but when the descendants of enslaved people say, I have been deprived across generations because of the exploitation of my ancestors. And it would be great if you are more enlightened now to agree to some kind of reparatory, reconciliatory moves. That would be nice. And I just have to add as a side note that a federal judge today has shut down. Do you know what it's called? The Fearless Women of Color program. I get the headline. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Yeah. Lynn, who's interviewing you? But yes, I mentioned this yesterday in our live space that we do, because they're using the laws of the land that were enacted to help the formerly enslaved and their ancestors have more equality and rights. And so, of course, things like, during the Civil Rights Act, the things that come under their affirmative action and those types of things that were all put in place to create a more level playing field.
Yes.
And so they are using aspects of these laws to accuse this organization of excluding white people, and so being, discriminating. Okay. And that's what I meant when I talked about yesterday how the laws that we have in place are being used to undermine our democracy, just to unravel it.
That makes me think of how bad faith misinterpretation of laws or an insistence on being literal. So when you say yes, they're taking laws that were instituted to make the playing field more level. And if you have affirmative action, then you are acknowledging that the playing field isn't level and that there's strong evidence of historical and continuing reasons that for there to be bumps or significant depressions in that playing field that mean, if there's college admittance principles that say the children of previous attendees can have a head start in their college application or are more likely to succeed in entries to college, but that Black people were excluded from multiple higher learning institutions, a majority of higher learning institutions, then you can say that is a significant depression in the playing field. So we can put something in to fill in those bumps. And the people being completely willfully misinterpreting of what level playing field means say level playing field means leave it alone, don't touch it. You can't make any adjustments to it, or it's unfair. You're messing with the playing field. And it's like, no, we're acknowledging the playing field was messed up. So to institute a level playing field, you have to have some restorative activities that say, yes, there's no alumni of an institution in it from a particular demographic if the laws of that institution purposefully excluded for generations people who were Black. And so that demographic deserves redress. Otherwise, it cannot be a level playing. And so that kind of willful misinterpretation applies to so much, because I just noticed today a federal judge who struck down the Biden administration's mask mandate. They said, oh, well, we've been looking at this linguistic corpus, this body of words from when the Constitution was written, and public health laws allowed the government to take action with regards to sanitation, which means cleaning, according to this body of text, of examples of text to analyze. Sanitation means to do with cleaning, so you can't have masks because masks don't clean anything, which isn't strictly true. I mean, if you have masks on, it helps the air become cleaner if you're not exhaling viral particles into it. But that's how that's how a federal judge used twisted logic to shut down the Biden-Harris administration's ability to take steps to protect public health. And the same with the Second Amendment, that they interpret that law to say everybody can have guns. It doesn't refer to the military, but it's pick and choose, because actually linguistic corpus of how bear arms was used. Bear arms was a phrase used in military context. So actually linguistics doesn't support the case at all, but they pick and choose with this being an originalist rather than going what would benefit a majority of Americans. They pick and choose, so they're supporting areas of potential exploitability and profitability with regards to selling more guns, or not selling masks. What's the opposite of selling masks? Forcing people to go back to work in pandemic conditions, or insisting that a level playing field means an untouched playing field. All cases of manipulative behavior and twisting language to achieve goals. And we have to go, what goals are they? Yes, we need to explain to the public whenever we can the goals of hierarchy maintenance that actually works out badly, because you let white supremacists, you let fascists win. And even if you think you're too high up on the hierarchy to worry about their methods and their strategies, you take immunity away from police officers. You let people who traffic in violence and threats of violence against others, in groups or out groups who've been otherized and vilified, you let those type of people with those fascist type of methods to succeed, and then everybody suffers.
Right.
And it's
yeah, and it's true. And the thing of it is that they are, I love that you talk about how, everyone suffers, and the cult that coalesces around the far right agenda suffers as well. And they are so willing to suffer, to stay in those states because of this hierarchy of race, their commitment and dedication to and just belief anchored in their white supremacy. So their racism and that feeling of superiority because of their race is something that they just have blinders on. They cannot get past or see past. They, there's a quote, I can't think of the name of the president or who said it, but about them being willing to have their pockets picked.
Oh, you could pick the pocket of the lowliest white man if you tell him he's better than a Black man.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Let's find out who. I'm Googling it right now.
Yeah. But this is where we are, and there is a strong group of people here in this country who, they've just bought into that indoctrination because it's part of who they are. It goes really all the way back to and probably further, because every time I say I feel like I can trace something back to one point, then later on I can go further with it. But let's
Yeah.
just stop at this point, when the lost cause narrative
Yes. Yeah.
came into being, and that was after the Civil War, which was fought over white Southerners believing they had a right to own other human beings because of their race.
Yes.
And they lost, of course, but they turned that loss. And you particularly in your conversation today have mentioned this savior complex. They have to see themselves in that savior role, and
Yes.
so they refuse to accept the loss, and they painted a narrative around it so that it really was a win, and they're still using it, and they have won many things with it. They got the compromise of 1877, with the Hayes Compromise, so that they could then enact the states' rights, which, while they could not no longer legally own slaves, they still could enact laws, Black Code laws and Jim Crow laws and things, to keep Black people in a state of subservience.
Look at all this
Yeah.
compromise. And I'm so glad you brought up the Civil War, because I was also wanting to talk about how the emotional manipulation was done of poor white people in the South who didn't themselves own any slaves, and
Mm,
who were probably paid lower wages than they would have otherwise have been because of the existence of free, enslaved, oppressive labor. And those
mhm.
people were lied to about what was at stake. They were told, we're not just we're fighting a war for slavery, but those Northerners want to destroy everything about threat, exaggeration as an emotional manipulation tool. I can see Alex Jones doing it when he says on his broadcast, because he owes $1 billion and more to the families of the Sandy Hook victims whose children were
Yes.
slaughtered, and whose followers he told it's a hoax, it's a government red herring. And so people attacked grieving parents, making them have to move houses multiple times, saying you're lying, your child didn't exist, you've just made up your dead child that you're grieving so that you can advance anti-gun propaganda. And
And
that
how
kind of,
sick does one have to be able to do that to grieving parents, parents who have lost children, which is horrific in and of itself.
yes,
It's just not natural.
to
But to
compound the
have it,
grief of people who've had the
mm,
worst pain in the world, who've experienced
hmm
the most loss that will never leave them, because everybody celebrating their other happy milestones with their children who are growing up will be rubbing a nerve on of the parent who's had their child taken from them at the age of 6 by,
right,
yes,
gun
by
violence,
gun
which we
violence. Yes.
talked about a lot in our conversation yesterday, because it is a plague. It is
Yes.
at epidemic proportions. It is at really the same, or maybe beyond, the drug crises that we have here in this country, and the problems that fentanyl is causing. Guns, I would say, are causing just as much, if not more,
Yes.
and that is another narrative that they have tried to reshape into, it's become a whole industry, and that's part of why I'm going to go off on a little tangent here,
Yes.
but this is why they do not want to actually implement any type of regulations around it, because it by allowing the gun violence and the fear, because even those who believe it's okay, to have guns and believe in the Second Amendment and all of these things, they now see that they too are vulnerable. So then they play on that vulnerability by all these other industries that spring up to give them the illusion of safety, the glass companies. And, I remember early on after the Covenant shooting, how these lawmakers were actually in the state house promoting things that could be done to prevent things like this from happening. But never once were any of those things to implement any type of regulations on the guns. It was about, special glass, special equipment. And of course, now, we got to this legislative session of arming teachers. So they take narratives and they are very, very good propagandists.
Yes.
And they have been doing this for a long time. It takes me back to kind of, I talk about sometimes, Project 2025 and how, the predecessor was the Leadership for Mandate, which they gave to Reagan. But then I discovered, this is an example of where I say it started.
Go back and back and you find a precedent.
Yeah. And I find that in 1937, they had a conservative manifesto, which actually has the same tenet as the Leadership for Mandate and Project 2025, the same grievances. And I understood that it came about because after World War I, and then certainly, World War II, there was a great societal shift toward, first of all, just restoring physical things that have been destroyed in the war. Mm-hmm. But not only that, restoring, I want to say spiritual, not in the religious sense, but the humanity, how people had just done inhumane things and had inhumane things done to them and their collective groups. And there was a collective sense of caring. And it was called, academics, I think, term this mood as liberal consensus. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Like just being good to one another, to people, and to providing a sense of safety. And so we had things that were enacted here in our country, the Green New Deal, that provided, social safety nets, after the,
you mean the New Deal, the New Deal.
Yes. The Green New Deal is what I would say is more, yes, but the New Deal. And so.
And even then they tried to leave professions, well, they did leave professions that were predominantly occupied by Black women out of it. So that's why service professionals in the hospitality industries are still so reliant on tips, because they were left out of the wage guarantees from the New Deal.
Right.
Because there was not pressure to make things fair or help Black workers. Yes.
Exactly. But the Conservative Manifesto came about and they were railing against all of those things. And it's the same things now. They did not want government regulations. They did not believe that people should have safety nets. They felt like that churches and charities should be able to take up the mantle on that. They were against the government investing in infrastructure. They felt that should be done by private companies and that they should profit from that. And so, today's iteration of that, it's pretty much the same. They are trying to take away Medicare, and they are still threatening to repeal Obamacare after, like some of their own constituents have benefited from it now. They're
neo-Confederates trying to preserve and expand their ability to profiteer from the suffering of others, because poor people are more easily pushed around and taxed, not just taxed, charged. You can charge poor people for everything if they have little political representation, because wealth and power has been allowed to purchase a disproportionate share of political influence. Then you can charge poor people a bunch of things, and they are like prisoners, and indeed to a degree on the continuum of slavery. Not being slaves, but being trapped and relatively powerless.
And the former guy, his tax breaks and credits that he gave to his wealthy donors benefited them far more than they benefited the average American. And most of the things that they want to put in place do pretty much the same. They prop up and benefit the oligarchs more than they do the average American person, or people, regardless of what color, what
Yes.
demographic group they may belong to.
You just made me think of the term collateral damage, because in the pursuit of harming or neglecting Black people, white people will be white people will be and are collateral damage of those dysfunctional goals.
There you go. And look at their determination and all the years of work to overturn Roe and finding success.
Yes.
There are white women who are being harmed by this law.
Yes.
Now, some of them are still upholding it, but some of them are being harmed. And this is true also with their pursuit of really taking over the schools and basically privatizing them. There are members of their base and their community who are being harmed, who will be harmed, and they recognize that. And this is where the cult mentality comes in. They recognize that the people that they have sent to represent them, even in their extreme desires, are ignoring some of them.
Yes.
And
yes, they've been conscripted to support the Neo-Confederacy, the goals of the Neo-Confederacy, even when they themselves ultimately will be fodder to a battlefield. And there are white women whose bodies are fodder for that. There are white children whose public schools will close down from lack of funding. There is a great deal of collateral damage to white people who allow white supremacists to gain power, even though intuitively they might think white supremacists in power will benefit. No, white people, the bulk of you will still be collateral damage. You will take on harms that are collateral damage. Your Trump tax cuts to the middle class will expire in 2025 because they were written that way. The tax cuts for the wealthy persist, and your tax cuts were a temporary bone for you to get excited about while the wealthy feast on the true meal. And trying to explain to white people that, well, not all white people, hashtag not all white, trying to explain to white people that it's against their interest to throw their lot in with white supremacists, even if they don't understand what they're doing, even if they're just subconsciously, emotionally attracted, because all of that fascism, all of that wealth lobbying power, because I mean, fascism is just like the unprincipled pursuit of power, using emotional manipulation as a tool to conscript people into a cult where they suspend their own ability to evaluate what's in their own interest and to evaluate evidence and to be able to tell who's lying and who's telling the truth. It's all suspended for the cause of identifying with someone who makes you feel good. And it shows you how, wow, humans really will starve to death for a higher goal, for a cult goal.
Yes. And you know what? Even during the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King had the March on Washington was for jobs and freedom. Okay.
Yes.
And it was also about undoing and addressing poverty, and it was across the board because there were poor white people, especially in the South. And even during Reconstruction, the schools that came about during that, the Rosenwald schools and these things, initially, when I started looking at some of the historical aspects, they invited white people in those communities to come and get educated because they were being deprived, as well as the enslaved and the newly, freed Black people. But many of them didn't, out of fear, and some of them because, they still thought that, they would be and were better just because they were white and they didn't need to be educated, and they certainly didn't need to be educated with Black people.
Yeah, it's like, where do you get your self-confidence from? Everybody needs self-confidence. But if you generate self-confidence from putting other people down, then it's a dysfunctional self-confidence, and harms will follow. And the people who I see fighting the loss of white heroism, I'm going to say white mythic heroism, because that's better. That bakes in the idea that it's not true.
Well, it is, and that is essentially, one of the key underpinnings of fascism and white Christian nationalism, because it has a mythic
component
story. Well, yeah, it starts with a mythic story that, like, there was this once great, land, great people, and it's all just a myth of greatness, either because of their religion, their race, and that their goal is to, restore this group to its former greatness. But the myth that they're selling is just that. It's a myth, but people, believe it. And, I'm someone who grew up in religion and in faith, and much of religion is built around, stories and myths, the stories of the Bible.
Yes, and parables and things.
Yes. And so they do the same thing to promote this white Christian nationalism that they are so married to,
Yeah, they often are married to it, and it goes quite literally in the case of a lot of white Republican women who are voting for politics, who will set policies in motion that will close down their maternity departments in their hospitals, close their whole hospitals if they're rural at all, and lacking, already have a staff shortage, close their public schools, enact all manner of harms to their communities and to their state, and ultimately to their nation. And they're married to it. They're literally married to men who tell them how to vote, and they're literally married to, or they've married their own identity to that idea of a hierarchy and to subservience to uplifting white men and heroic white men.
Yeah, and I mean, and the thing of it is that when I study some of this, I was looking into the Moms for Liberty, and also discovered that they're just a modern iteration of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and they were very powerful at one point in their heyday. And even though that they were women, they were they bought into the patriarchal narrative. They believed that women's places were in their homes. I think nowadays they even have a name for this, triad wives.
Trad wife?
Trad, yeah, believing
yeah.
that, this is your place. And this is also, part of just religious teachings in many sects. As I said, I grew up in a religious environment and home, and it is, part of what they teach, that, women have certain places, and in certain denominations,
women
they
are
don't.
The neck and men are the head.
Yeah, and they don't have a place even in the church. And so that's, I feel like, part of the success of this narrative that they push, that people who are harmed by it still buy into it, is because it is so steeped in religious indoctrination.
Yes. Yes, religion was a key partner in helping develop a justification and a rationale for why enslaving other human beings was a good idea. And the religious rationale for it was God is blessing white people with rule over the lesser favored people who it's perfectly fine to enslave. In fact, you're doing them a favor. It's all good. And so every bit of evidence that no, in fact, it's not all good. People who've been deprived of their liberty, their freedom, their family intactness, and away, don't like any of that. They had to try and hush it down and come up with really inhumane punishments to just shut it down as quickly as possible, so that the ideas weren't validated and didn't spread.
Yeah.
So it was unacceptable.
Yeah. And they, again, like I said, go back to these biblical stories, and they take aspects of them quite literally, like the Genesis. Men should have dominion over this and that, and there is a religious sect that is called dominionism, where they take these beliefs quite literally. And if you've noticed, the Republicans are very kind of switching lanes here a little bit, but the Republicans are very supportive of Israel. Not just because of, it's rooted in, again, their biblical beliefs, because they believe and they have taught for years that Israel has a role to play in this myth
preconditions
of
for the rapture.
Christianity. Yes, yes.
Yes. Preconditions for the rapture. When Israel's
Mm-hmm.
full of Jews, then Jesus will come in his second coming, and then all of those Jews might burn.
Yeah. It's not that they care about the Jews so much, but they need them to, play their role of, as you say, burning or
they can
being
be converted. They might have an opportunity to be converted, because I was talking to some people who are raised in the Mormon faith, and they've rejected it, but they said, they kind of gloss over certain bits, like yes, the Jews will be in Israel, Jesus will come for his second coming, and then da-di-da-di-da. All the Christians are sent to heaven. And what about all the Jews? Yes, da-di-da-di-da. That was glossed over.
Exactly, because they're just, like pawns on the page of their epic story that needs to play out. So, and it's amazing to me that we have people in our country in the highest offices in the land who believe this and who are willing to do what they need to do to see it fulfilled. And this is where they feel like, they're winning, they're making movements, because you've got the Speaker of the House, who certainly carries this belief. And we had Bill Barr at one time, the Attorney General, and and part of this belief, they have international thoughts. They have thoughts about how things are play in from an international standpoint, i.e. with Israel. But they also believe this dominion needs to take place, and like they have 7 pillars. I can't remember all of them, but it's like, family, church, work, education,
and
arts and entertainment, and government.
You've got to dominate everywhere.
Exactly. So they need all of these people with these religious beliefs to be in place in all of these things. And so they see part of it being fulfilled when you have people in power, as I said, in some of the highest offices in the land. And then I've mentioned, there's not a lot written about them, but I'm still searching, because there is a group called City of Elders, and they are of the same mindset, this dominionist philosophy, and they kind of operate with the idea that they start at the bottom. They start working themselves into places of power at the school boards, dog catcher, the librarians, and just as slowly but surely get into all of these institutions that they need to have dominion over, so that they can start enacting these godly laws and put things right.
Yeah, because they lost. I mean, all of that, the 7 divisions, it's everything. Basically, they've tried to encapsulate everything, because they need to try and enact guerrilla warfare in every field of life to get a gain against the prevailing liberal humanitarian sense of human rights and inclusivity and did I run out of battery? No, I didn't. They have lost that war, and so they're always trying to strike a blow to regain power, and they've been wildly successful in ways that some people didn't anticipate.
I think that they didn't really anticipate it. They're so committed to the fight, and they have been fighting it for so long that at times I really do feel that they're surprised. It's like when the dog catches the car. It's like, oh my God, what do I do now? I think Trump being elected was one of those moments. I think when Roe was overturned is another, even though there were many clamoring for it. I think that there were still some who didn't believe it, and who at one point had reasonable attitudes about reproductive rights. But let's talk about this for a minute.
Yeah, they're pandering to the ideologues. I mean, you can divide that into the true religious fanatics, and then those who exploit the fanaticism, or at least follow and pander to the religious fanaticism, because it's all being mushed together in a coalition of theocrats and oligarchs.
Exactly. And again, this is where we talk about the collateral damage, even to their base, that they're willing to endure, for the cause, for the greater cause.
Emotionally and intellectually validated for what they've been taught is a value, and fighting against the degradation to society and the families that they've been told about from the evils of modern secular society. And we're out here trying to say modern secular society is actually pretty good. And it's true that society does tend to go in cycles of progress in a more inclusive, fair, just direction. And then you get backlash. And when the backlash builds enough momentum of resentment against minorities for achieving a step closer to equality, or resentment against women for achieving a step closer to equality of respect with regards to men, then the backlash can drag women back. And when we were saying before about the women who are married to the idea of white patriarchy, you have no further to look than Harrison Butker, who said, women have been told the most diabolical of lies. You're looking forward to your careers, but my wife, let me tell you, has found the greatest satisfaction after she married me and became a mother.
Wow. Didn't she win? I mean, geez. Yes. And again, going back to the UDC, those women, they felt like that they made them feel that it was honorable to be held down, basically. This is where you belong. And so they embrace it with, godly, glory, And there was a clip of him coming out to vote that the men in the family should be the ones making the decisions around that. So it's really kind of hard to fathom in the year of our Lord 2024 that has lived and had any type of learning or anything in the world at all would be okay with this. This is where the brainwashing and the indoctrination comes about. They are so good. They really are.
They are, but it's all their guerrilla warfare tactic against the success of modern life, because we had won. Hang on, can you still hear me? Does that still work? Okay, good.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, yes, the general winning of modern life the Civil Rights Act was passed. The Supreme Court did at some point have protections for Black voters. It's been eroded by the current conservative stacked Supreme Court under Chief Justice John Roberts, who is personally responsible for winding back or overseeing the winding back of a lot of protections against racial gerrymandering and racist targeting of Black voters for voter suppression. And they said, you know what, it's okay to gerrymander districts as long as you don't do it on a racial basis, as long as it's a political gerrymander. Which is ridiculous.
Yes.
That's anti-democratic and accountability for voters, because if they can't choose a political representative, because the political representative gets to choose which voters count in which district, then that is not just putting out the welcome mat for autocracy, that's putting out a 6-course meal for autocracy. Don't love it. Don't love it, but that's what I'm trying to practice telling people about as efficiently as I can, so that it gets their attention and that they can look it up further for themselves. I like it when we
and they yeah, and
yeah,
they are working really hard to stop a ballot initiative there, so that the citizens are the ones who have a say in the map drawing. And that's why, I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. That's why DeWine tried to put his savior cape on, act as if he was trying to do the correct and right thing, by calling a special session to ensure because of their laws and the date of the official DNC convention, he would have, the DNC would have missed it, and he would not have technically been able to be on. But, most states just went into session and gave an exemption and put him on the ballot. Same
Yes,
thing, but what they were trying to do was to tie him being put on the ballot with some other initiatives that they wanted to, some poison pills, as David Pepper calls them, that they wanted to, and those initiatives taking back the voices of the people, the really big ones, because it's on the ballot for this election cycle, is this gerrymandering, the right of the people to have a say in the process. And like that, and it's baffling to me that people are so willing to, like, we are a representative democracy, but what we work to do and hope to get to a place where we search for and we find those representatives who most closely align with our concern and addressing our concerns. But these people are so willing to just turn everything over. Already indicated that they are willing to ignore the voice of their constituents, and that I still don't understand. But like who can understand cult mentality? But that's just how.
I'm going to hazard a guess. I'm going to say there are some people who will try and seek shelter under the cloak of authoritarianism because they're trying to protect themselves from the ego hurt and the emotional pain of being wrong and of having ancestors who weren't as heroic as they were taught. These are the people who supported Ron DeSantis in Florida, changing history books so that Rosa Parks just chose to sit somewhere else on the bus, and they don't mention why. Just, she didn't let people boss her around. She sat where she wanted to sit. Why couldn't she sit where she wanted to sit? That's not in there anymore. And instead, they have to overinflate the present day risk of communism by making learning about communism mandatory in the curriculum. And I'd be fine with that if they didn't reach to take action to forward their other goals, which is to say, look at the parallels. Communism made some speech illegal, and now Dr. Jordan Peterson has been reprimanded by the Board of Psychology in Colorado for saying anti-trans things. It's the same. It's not the same. And to conflate modern social liberalism with the ills of communism is a fabrication done to literally to weave some cloth to put over people's eyes.
Yes, and I think it's strange and very suspect that they denied the teaching of certain aspects of African American history to high school students, yet they want to force the teaching of communism starting at K through 12, and their penchant for shaping, the learning, the curriculum narrative around patriotism and these types of things. I have to wonder. I'm concerned at how they will shape this narrative of communism that they plan to teach, because I'm old enough to remember in my youth, during the civil rights movement and the rise of some, kind of protest groups like the Black Panthers and things like that, they designated a lot of Black Americans as communists.
Communists, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a transaction. You paint the communists as here, and you paint anybody advocating for social justice as a communist, and then you're rewarding the people who oppose them with the mantle of heroism.
Or patriotism.
Yes, they're heroes for opposing them. And it's a transaction. You remove accurate teaching of Black history from school books, and you're restoring white students' ability to think fondly of their heroic ancestors.
Just lost you, Davina.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You faded out there for a moment.
Oh, I was saying a good thing. I was I'll repeat myself in danger of repeating myself. But I was saying that it's a transaction, that if you remove accurate teaching of African American history, of Black history from school books as much as you can, and then you're restoring to white students, whether they want it or not, a view of their ancestors as heroic, of a white identity as undilutedly heroic. Because normal, healthy white adults can say, well, not normal actually, because it's not that normal, but emotionally healthy white adults can take on the burden of true history and say, I'm not a bad person. I might still have a brain that's a bit marinated in unquestioned white supremacist thinking because it's the milieu, and we've evolved out of some of it, but not as much as we think. And that's just my journey for me to move on from, or to learn and grow through. But and dysfunctional white adult says children can't learn about that because it will shatter this belief that they need in order to be self-confident. And in exchange, I'll take away Black history, but I'll give them an identity as a warrior to fight against the evils of communism. Did you get that? Did I get it?
Yes, I did. So I have really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm looking forward to our next one. I'm just going to try to kind of wind it down here.
Well, the connection's fluctuating in quality now as well, but I feel like we covered a lot of ground discussing history and sort of the emotional narratives of restoring heroic goodness and restoring warrior state in regards to communism. That's where I feel we ended up. But there's so much, and you've done so much research into the Mums of Liberty and how they draw on so much a pattern, a continuity from the Daughters of the Confederacy. Was that
United Daughters of the Confederacy?
United Daughters of the Confederacy. Yes. So we can see that historical pattern that comes in waves almost as a backlash to things, whether they be the election of a Black president or the passing of a Civil Rights Act. And it was Lyndon Johnson. It was the literal president who signed the Civil Rights Act who said that quote you raised before.
Right. I knew. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been having a bit of brain fog. I don't know. I must have caught a bug or something. I'm trying to slowly get it back. But thank you for looking that up. I appreciate it. Well, Google is wonderful. I wish more people would use it and believe some of these things, and maybe they wouldn't be so easily swayed.
Or to be brave enough to stare history in the face, even non-heroic history, and not let your ego get dependent like a drug user on a cape of an assumed cape of heroism, because it's not a cape that holds up. But if you have so much to grieve the loss of that cape of being a white savior or a white hero, that you seek shelter under the cape of a little self-appointed Superman despot who's like, I'm a strong man, I'll defeat all your enemies, just worship me. It's dysfunctional, and we'll all end up being collateral damage unless we can fight the process. But I think we can. I'm feeling good about it, Dee, because Trump was convicted of 34 crimes, and guess what? He hasn't appointed a VP yet. When he does, imagine how viscerally that's going to appeal to our imaginations as we go back in time to what he did to his last vice president, because that's
exactly
a biggie. Oh, how are you feeling about being his new VP pick? And how long do you think it's going to be before he turns on you and incites a mob to chase after you, and you come within inches of being murdered by people with zip ties and baseball bats?
Yes, and it's going to be interesting to see who is so desperate to have power that they would want to be his vice president, and a lot of them are vying for the spot. And before we wrap up, since we kind of started off with him, we're coming back to him and his recent conviction. Yay for aspects of the judiciary still working, and people doing their job. But I thought it was interesting when I checked my news last night. I saw that his first campaign stop, really, after this conviction, is Arizona, and he'll be doing a live event, taking questions from the audience with Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA Action, which is the political PAC, an arm of Turning Point USA. And I talk about that organization and that young man a lot because he has gained a lot of influence and power within that party, and he has been working a long time to shape the narratives that people have bought into. And he recently kind of made a shift, because in the beginning, not that I was so into, what he was doing, but he was pushing, I feel like, more libertarian types of talking points. And see, you have now also a split in the Libertarian Party, because they were no regulations and taxes and these kinds of things, and pretty much everything else was kind of live and let live. And they actually shunned some of these white supremacist ideologues. But now he has embraced those ideologues that he actually once had verbal, public, sparring with. And he is embracing it and he's touting it. And so with Trump going there, I just feel that this is very significant, because it is a battleground state, but also the fact that Turning Point USA is sponsoring it. And, he being Kurt, is working very closely with Mike Flynn and his Awaken America to really, really push this new kind of white Christian nationalism with the QAnon cherry on top.
Beautiful, beautiful collection of that. What a great sentence.
Yeah. And they just recently had the Libertarian Convention last weekend and nominated their guy, and the former guy as well as RFK was there, and they have had a split, a schism within the Libertarian, because some of them do not like that they have embraced this MAGA ideology. And the former guy actually got booed there, and he turned around and he lied about it, just like he just recently lied and said he never said lock Hillary Clinton up. So I am all for the videos and montages that are being done with all the times that he said that. I mean, he said it so much, I think we can all kind of like hear that playing in our heads. Yes. And how quick they are to change the narrative, to lie.
Yeah, that's
and
the whole
their
stick
base
of fascism, isn't it? Lie,
yes.
lie, and demonstrate your power
over
people, so they bond together on their shared alternate reality.
Yes, and this is why it's important for people like us to keep having these conversations, for Advocacy Arena to keep providing sources of discussion and information and history, because they are trying to rewrite history. The House Republicans are trying to pass a bill. They don't have enough signatures yet to basically just declare that Trump had nothing to do with January 6th, almost like, the jury, judge, and, and all, just, kind of like their own little version of immunity from the legislature, But, I say if they're doing this, how long before if they were in power, how long do you think it would be before they actually passed some legislation that just flat out declared January 6th was a tourist day? It was no insurrection. And, so you can't have any
visit, and now it's a holiday to celebrate patrons.
It was just a regular day, and just regular tourists were there. And, and this is like some Russian Putin-esque kind of ideology and behavior, because, after he invaded Ukraine, which is like basically declaring war on the country, he forbid his citizens to use that phrase.
Yep, the more distinct alternate reality they craft, the more they can bond over their mutual adoption of it. And it just starts with accepting Donald Trump into your life as a hero of The Apprentice, an epitome of the American dream, and then you build on that to now he's your God cult king leader. And,
right.
And he
so
can
basically
grab
they're accepting him as their Lord and Savior.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so scary. But it's really kind of how they're behaving, and it is typical cult behavior. So it has been a wonderful conversation today. I know we've been all over the place, but it's been good. We've covered a lot because we haven't talked in a while. So I can't wait for our next conversation. But I want to give you an opportunity to just leave the audience with some closing thoughts to hold on to and to marinate on.
Yeah, I've got a great one for you, Dee. I love it because the Washington Post takes as a tagline, is it democracy dies in darkness?
Yes.
I think that's what it is. And they've just been, their new head of Washington Post is somebody with right-wing credentials. So it's a significant concern in an election year. But whatever my closing thought is, not democracy dies in darkness, but democracy dies in silence. And I'll quote the William Butler Yeats line when he was dreaming of an apocalypse and woke up and wrote it down. And he wrote, the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of passionate intent. So I always want to flip that and say, let us be full of passionate intensity because democracy dies in silence. And we will sing its praises loudly and advocate for its protection.
I love that. And it also reminds me of what the historian Timothy Snyder says, that, his instructions to us to do the work of defending democracy, to prevent authoritarianism. And he says, he leads with, do not obey in advance. So don't buy into these narratives. Don't say yes. Don't, we have to do all that we can to stop these advances and to correct the record and the narratives.
Yes.
And just keep using our fire hoses of truth, because the mainstream media resources that we have traditionally relied on are becoming more and more infiltrated with propagandists, and it's certainly a disservice to us as citizens, but it's certainly to democracy. And so as citizens who want our democracy to prevail, to live another day, for us to continue working to perfect it, it's up to us to continue to make sure that we are informed, and that we inform others. And so we just keep telling the truth and fighting back.
Speaking truth with our whole chest.
Exactly. So I want to thank you, my dear. It has been a lovely conversation today. I'm looking forward to our next one, and I look forward to having you join us again in advocacy arena and sharing some lofty insights with us, keeping us pumped up and positive, because I do believe in the goodness of most of the citizens of our country and their desire for us to maintain this imperfect